this year's annual Unionlearn conference. Now, normally I would start off today by saying, isn't it great to be here in Congress Hall? Isn't it great that you can all meet each other? Isn't it great that you can chat in person? Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we've got to do this conference online. But let's hope that this is the last year that we have to do this. And let's hope that next year we can all be together to re-establish acquaintances, to make connections, to have real discussions with real people, and to be together in person. But even though this is an online conference, and even though I'm sure many people are heartily sick of online conferences, it is the best we can do, and it is a great opportunity to celebrate union learning and the benefits of education and lifelong learning. And the theme for today's conference is New Opportunities for Union Learning. The conference is a celebration of the significant contribution unions and union learning reps have made to help workers, especially in these most difficult, the past 3 years, these most difficult times due to the pandemic and lockdown. And today's conference will highlight the unique role that Unionlearn reps play in the workplace, supporting some of the most vulnerable and disadvantaged learners. And I just want to now pay tribute to all of you who have stayed working as ULRs, stayed helping your colleagues, stayed helping the most disadvantaged and vulnerable workers to gain the skills and the learning that they need in order to lead more secure lives and have better work. And I also want to pay tribute to all the union learning staff, both in unions and in the TUC, who had to leave because the DfE pulled the grant and stopped them doing their most valuable and most essential work. We know that the Union Learning Fund is the most effective way to reach those workers who have multiple levels of need, those who've got compound needs, that they are insecure, they are underconfident, they've got low literacy and numeracy skills, and they might have other issues as well. And we know from all the evidence that we gathered over the period of Unionlearn that this was the most effective way of reaching the most disadvantaged workers who are disproportionately likely to get the least training. It's a paradox that those who need training, learning and develop the most are the least likely to get it. And we know that Unionlearn was a fantastic way of getting lifelong skills to those workers. So it's a huge shame it's gone, and I pay tribute to everyone who is continuing that work and those who've had to move on to do other things because the DfE, in an act of vandalism by Gavin Williamson, who was taking it out on unions to end the most successful way of bringing along lifelong learning and skills. I wanted to say that because that's reality, but that's not what we're going to focus on today, because today we have a number of guest speakers and a range of activities which we know and we hope you will find and you'll enjoy and you'll find valuable. You'll be hearing from Bridget Phillipson, who's Shadow Secretary of State for Education, from the mental health author James Whithey. I've just bought his book, How to Tell Anxiety to Sod Off, because I'm an anxiety sufferer and I really like the title and I want to know how to tell anxiety to sod off. So I'm really looking forward to listen to him. We've got Simon Parkinson, who's the Chief Executive and General Secretary at the Workers' Education Association, and we've got Andrew Dean from the University of Exeter. We've also got Carl Roper and Kudsia Batul from the TUC, and a panel discussion on union learning, the landscape after COVID-19 and union learning funding. So I'm hoping, I'm sure that all of you will find something valuable and interesting in this online conference. Now, I'm now going to introduce Frances O'Grady, who needs no introduction. Safe to say, Frances, you look marvellous. And as General Secretary of the TUC, we're delighted to welcome you back to the Unionlearn conference.
Thanks very much, Mary. I was thinking we look like a Specsavers convention, but great to see you. And also just a big welcome to everybody. I can see people joining on the chat box. Mick O'Shea from ASLEF, PCS Scotland, Unison Bedford Hospital, Newcastle University. It's fantastic to see everybody joining today. I do want to thank Mary, because Mary's been our sort of union learning rep in chief, really, our convener over many years, and kept us going through thick and thin. Looking forward to hearing our other speakers too. But yeah, yeah, like you, Mary, a massive welcome to all our Union Learning reps who have stuck with us, our friends and partners who have been second to none in terms of the solidarity they've shown us, and also to Kev and the whole TUC team who have kept, alongside all our friends in unions, kept doing the job, keeping us going through these tough times. Now, the Union Learning Fund may be gone, but let's be clear, Union Learning is here to stay. You cannot kill the spirit. And I have every confidence that if we keep going through this tough period, we will rise again. And it has been tough. The pandemic has been tough in so many ways for so many people, not least our key workers on the front line. But I think we have all learned lessons, and we should be proud of our achievements as a whole movement. And of course, just to be clear, we are going to keep pushing for that independent public inquiry to be genuinely independent and to make sure that those lessons are learned, not just in our movement, but for the whole country. One of those, I would say, is our achievement in getting the furlough scheme. And let there be no mistake on that one. That was a great trade union idea that we pushed, not just in this country, but internationally, that the best way to support our economy was through subsidising wages, keeping money in people's pockets to spend in local shops and businesses, keeping people and maintaining skills at work. Our key objective was to avoid mass unemployment. Many of us know what that does to organised labour, to the power of workers, and we were determined, and we won. It wasn't perfect, but we got a furlough scheme that at its peak was supporting 1 in 3 of the workforce. So just think about what would have happened if we hadn't secured that. But there is a lesson there too. We argued hard that furlough should have been conditional on employers having to provide workers with opportunities to reskill, retrain, upskill. And we didn't win that one with the government, but that's something, again, we'll keep pushing. And of course, we're arguing that for the future, we need that ready-made furlough scheme with skills as part of the offer, should firms hit temporary difficulties and need support to get through. We also had that incredible experience of the whole trade union movement having to accelerate its shift online. And that includes learning. No substitute, and I don't think anybody would claim it's a substitute for face-to-face, but the reach that we achieved was amazing. If you think about some of the work we did on key issues like mental health, critically, like keeping our workplaces COVID secure, dealing with the inequalities that became so stark, were already there, but became even more stark during the pandemic. And of course, organising as the best way to protect people at work. That shift online was absolutely critical. The team produced new guides on really important issues like redundancy. We always try and avoid redundancy if we can. It's always the last resort. But if it does come to redundancy, then we need to make sure that people are fairly treated and get a decent reward. Support for older workers, they've been the ones who have been leaving the labour force, and it was really important that we're supporting older workers where they want to stay in work. Issues like dyslexia and the new level 3 entitlement, although we've always argued that entitlement shouldn't just be restricted to level 3. And I think we've shown real ambition as a movement, including setting up that career zone, which gives people the advice and support that people crave to get on at work and in life. Another lesson I think through this period, as I mentioned right at the top, was the importance of our allies, our friends, and we've made some new ones, including the Metro mayors, many of the Metro mayors who have done a brilliant job, but also combined authorities where we've been running joint skills projects. in the West Midlands, in South Yorkshire, and soon in North Tyneside too. And I want to give a special shout out to Matt Poynton and Janet Johnson for all their massive commitment and hard work to get that off the ground. Now, of course, we seem to be in a different period where thanks to the NHS, because it's the NHS and the staff in the NHS who are the real heroes and heroines here, thanks to their efforts on the vaccine rollout, credit where it's due, we now seem to be in that transition phase of pandemic to endemic. And across the movement, the TUC's priorities are pretty clear. We know that it's still massively important that we keep workplaces COVID secure. We keep focused on those issues like inequalities, the protection of key workers, and that campaign to fix sick pay, because it is still a scandal that we have one of the lowest rates of sick pay amongst any of the advanced economies. And that means that many people are having to make that terrible choice between going into work to be able to feed their families or taking time off when they should to protect their own and others' health. We also have argued strongly, many of you will have seen, that we need a wages-led recovery. Let's make this very clear, not restraint, thank you very much. We've had 10 years of real wages falling below inflation. Now we've got energy bills and everything else rocketing. Britain needs a pay rise, and you'll hear more from the TUC and unions on that in the next few days. We also need more resilience for our economy against future shocks, whether that's artificial intelligence or whether it's climate change. We know that there are still big changes to come, and we need to make sure that our public services and our economy are fit and supported to do what's necessary. And as many of you will know, a big priority for the movement has been anti-racism, because we believe as a movement that it shouldn't matter whatever background you come from, whatever race, religion, nationality, everyone deserves a decent job. And our job as a union movement is to win that. The great news is, as you'll have seen, we now have an even more diverse cadre of union learning reps, more women, more Black and ethnic minority, and we know that there is real strength in diversity. The more that we look like the workforce we aim to organise, the more chance we have of winning. We also know that 3/4 of learning reps kept on right through the worst days of the pandemic. They kept on advising and supporting workers, playing that role with or without the Union Learning Fund, and that nearly as many also report that it made a real and material difference to helping us to organise as a movement and grow, because again, we know there's strength in numbers. Now, the theme of this conference is about new opportunities for union learning. And of course, we've all watched with great interest as the Prime Minister announced the levelling up agenda. And my goodness me, this country needs levelling up. And regardless of the colour of the government, that territory ought to be an opportunity for us, because the truth is you cannot level up Britain unless you level up work and level up skills, level up pay. That is key to unlocking our potential. And we know that the UK has been held back, growth has been held back because of low pay and that big squeeze on living standards. So we need more investment, more productivity and more skills. And we also need to tackle regional inequality and all forms of inequality. I'm really looking forward to hearing Labour's Shadow Minister, Bridget, today, because she knows all about what happens when whole communities face deindustrialisation and no support for those industries, no support for the transition. She was born and bred, of course, in a coal mining community, and I suspect we're going to hear from her a real passion about why we cannot repeat the mistakes of the past. No return to the 1980s. We are determined on that. The answer, of course, is we need an industrial policy with decent work and good skills at its heart. Where is the government's employment bill? Because what is absolutely crystal clear is that we need stronger employment rights, including rights to retrain. And of course, rights aren't worth anything unless we have strong enforcement too. And we know that the best form of enforcement is strong and growing unions and collective bargaining. That's the best way to protect people at work. We certainly need more investment in FE and in the FE workforce. And we've been arguing for a national skills fund, including provision to fund top quality apprenticeships. We're also going to have to transform many of the jobs that we have. Paul Novak, the Deputy General Secretary, alongside our President, Sue Ferns, were members of the government's Green Jobs Task Force, and it estimated that around 6 million jobs will need upskilling to meet that climate change agenda. And no apologies from us. We are demanding and will continue to demand a reinstatement of the Union Learning Fund. What a stupid decision it was. And I know Mary will agree in sharing my dismay that the Secretary of State, Gavin Williamson, at the time made that decision against, frankly, the advice of many. We'd already proved our worth in straight value for money terms. The Union Learning Fund and the work that our reps have done boost the UK economy to the tune of £1.4 billion. We have businesses lining up from Tesco's, Tata Steel, Heathrow Airport, lining up to say, protect and keep that fund. It's well worth the money. It is doing brilliant work in our workplaces. And of course, at the core of what trade unionism is about, we know that this transformed lives, tens of thousands of lives, 250,000 every year, only because of the work that we do. We're getting opportunities to learn, to grow, to develop. I don't know if anybody knows what's happened to Gavin Williamson. The last thing I read about him was it'd been exposed that he'd made one of those recommendations for those COVID contract, so-called VIP lanes, where he'd managed to get a firm a contract worth £1.7 million. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? That was ruled unlawful in the High Court. Well, I think the abolition of the Union Learning Fund was immoral. And in the court of public opinion, it was wrong-headed, it was stupid, and that needs to be changed. I'm really pleased that Labour has announced this new deal for workers, really important rights in there, like banning 0 hours contracts, which we've been banging on about for years, as obscene, frankly, keeping workers insecure and very often low paid too. They're also promising rights to fair pay agreements, that employers will have to get in the room with unions to negotiate those fair pay agreements, and new rights to organise and to bargain too. Labour has also set up a new skills commission chaired by David Blunkett, which our very own Kevin Rowan sits on. So I think we're moving in the right direction, where the absolute centrality of skills and the work that you do day in, day out is going up Labour's agenda and is seen as key to delivering the fairness that workers deserve. So just to end from me, Mary, I always say the trade union movement at its heart is about friendship between working people. It's about our resilience, because we've been through a few ups and downs over our history, but we keep going. And of course, at its heart, it's always been about education and learning. Us as working people, developing our confidence as well as our skills to get the deal that we deserve. So we keep on keeping on. Thank you for everything you do, and solidarity to everybody. Have a great conference.
Thank you, Frances. That's a great, rousing way to start us off, and it sets the scene really well on all the key issues and what the TUC is doing, what Labour is doing, and what we need to do in order to grow our economy and upskill our workers so that they are able to be more productive, lead more fulfilled lives. And the great violence that was done by the axing of the Union Learning Fund. I mean, I have many, many reasons to be able to say very confidently that Gavin Williamson was the worst Secretary of State for Education that I've ever had the misfortune to work with. And I've worked with some that could have vied for that, but he, you know, hapless, hopeless, ignorant, unable to deal with what was in front of his face. And he did that as an act of political spite and malice. That was red meat to the Tory right, and a huge shame. So, you know, we're looking forward to what we can do, you know, to recreate the Union Learning Fund when we have a Secretary of State who understands the worth of skills. And we don't, you know, he certainly didn't. So thank you so much. And now I am delighted to welcome our guest speaker, Bridget Phillipson. Bridget, as you know, is the Labour MP for Horton and Sunderland South. She's been an MP since 2010. And she is the Shadow Secretary of State for Education. She was born and raised in Washington in Sunderland, attended local schools, and she joined the Labour Party at 15. She read modern history at Hertford College, Oxford, where she was co-chair of the University Labour Club. She returned to the North East, and before becoming an MP, she managed a refuge for women and children fleeing from domestic violence. So Bridget, it's absolutely wonderful that you're here, and we're really looking forward to what you've got to say.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Mary. Thanks very much for that warm introduction, and greetings to you all from sunny Sunderland. It's lovely to see that there are so many people on the call from right across the country. First of all, I just want to say a big thank you to Frances and to Kevin for inviting me today. But I want to thank each and every one of you for all of the work that you're doing and for the role that you play. I'm really honoured to speak to you, and more importantly, to listen to you in the Q&A that will follow. Last week was National Apprenticeships Week, and this week is Heart Unions Week, and it's a great month to be Labour's Shadow Secretary of State for Education, and a great time to be talking to you and listening to you about the really important role that unions play in delivering learning and skills in our society. To me and to Labour, the role of trade unions in ensuring that working people have the skills that they need is obvious. The work that the TUC does through Unionlearn is so impressive, but also so important for learners and for our wider society, but also for unions too, because it's easy for people just to think about the importance of union involvement in delivering training only through the lens of the people who receive the training. And while that's the best place to start our thinking, and I'll say a little bit more about that shortly, I think it's really important that that isn't where we end. And what do I mean by that? I mean that as well as spreading skills and engagement and confidence, as Frances was just saying, getting people involved in their union through learning is good in itself. Union learning reps are a key part of ensuring that unions are a success in every workplace. And I've seen for myself here in Sunderland as a constituency MP just how important that has been to so many workers in workplaces in my community. We want people to join a union, to get involved, to benefit from the involvement, and also to help others to get involved too. And I was really heartened to see the Union Learning Reps report published last month that a higher proportion of Union Learning Reps are women than ever before, and a higher proportion are from Black and minority ethnic backgrounds. This is great news about how effectively unions are changing to reflect the world in which we work, a world which, of course, the pandemic has turned upside down. I was also really struck by the responses of so many of the reps to the challenges and opportunities that the sharp move to online meetings in the pandemic has brought. It's impossible to read the thoughtful and measured observations from the reps on both the advantages and the pitfalls of moving training and learning online without being reminded what a totally self-defeating approach it is for the government to ignore those voices and to ignore that wisdom. Labour wants a role for unions in learning and securing better outcomes together right across the world of work. And in this brief that I took on at the end of last year, I'm struck again and again, and I think Mary would agree, that what people miss most at the moment, their criticism of government or management, isn't just about paying conditions, it's also about respect, about being supported to do better, to succeed and to achieve in their job. And this is what we need to do a lot better as a country, and that's exactly where unions can play such an important role. As you'll all know, and as you were just, as we just heard there from Francis, my enthusiasm for the role of unions in delivering an ambitious skills agenda for our country sadly isn't a view universally held in Westminster, and the Conservatives have taken a rather different approach. The decision last year by the government to scrap the Union Learning Fund was an extraordinary choice, short-sighted at best, if not actively spiteful. Cutting a programme which almost 9 out of 10 employers said was beneficial to their business, that supported 4/5 of learners to gain skills that they said could transfer to a new job, and which particularly targeted reluctant learners and those with low or no qualifications to gain new skills, is simply nonsensical. The government have ended up supporting separate programmes to drive up literacy and numeracy, when that was one of the areas where the Union Learning Fund was so effective and so successful. It is ridiculous and it's self-defeating, and it puts ideology ahead of the ambition that we need. Because to us, the Skills Bill, which is currently going through Parliament, contains a number of important measures, but represents a failure of ambition, a failure to step up to the challenges that we face as a country. Labour wants to build a high-skilled economy where people have the security that comes from a decent job, the prosperity that comes from being properly paid for a job done well, and where working people are treated with respect and know that if the world changes around them, they'll be supported to retrain. And that's the approach that we need urgently. So many of the big challenges that our society will face in the years ahead are about skills, about training, and perhaps most important of all, about retraining. The challenge of building a new economy outside of the European Union that delivers security, prosperity, and respect to every corner of our country, and that sees us buy, make, and sell more here in Britain. And that challenge of achieving net zero and the new skills and new skilled workers that we need to make that a success and to see that transition in how the economy is run. The challenge of ensuring that everyone grows old with respect and dignity, as so many of us happily go on to live longer. And I've spoken to so many people, trade unionists, employers, and above all, young people, about the way that things aren't working at the moment. I hear from young people unable to get the apprenticeships that they want, about the skills that our country needs because the government makes it too hard for employers to take them on. And I hear from people mid-career who see that the world is changing around them, that they're skilled for a role that's dropping away, who find that they can't get the support that they need to reskill at pace. And I also hear from employers, many of whom are keen to offer new opportunities, but are frustrated at the massive paperwork and the glacial timetable for getting new opportunities approved. And I hear from trade unionists rightly annoyed that one of the most effective ways of ensuring and supporting workplace learning has been stopped for no good educational reason, just political spite. But they all have stories to tell about the way that government failures have set them back. But the big picture is simple. As it stands, government skills policy just isn't working. They've had over a decade to get it right and they still haven't. So to take the most obvious example, the Apprenticeships Levy, the proud creation of the Secretary of State himself when he was the government's apprenticeship czar, has only not stopped the decade-long drop-off in the number of apprenticeship starts in our country, but that decline has actually accelerated since the introduction of the levy. Instead of creating opportunities, millions of pounds of levy funding sits unspent with frustrated employers, young people being failed, and that money eventually makes its way back to the Treasury. Now, that might count as a success for the government, but it isn't success for our young people, not for their employers, not for trade unions, and not for our country. The next Labour government will take a different approach, and we are determined to get this right. We know that skills aren't just delivered by government, by institutions, or by employers. And we know that there is a big role for trade unions. We know that unionised workers are safer, better trained, and better paid. And that's not by chance. At Labour Party conference in the autumn and at a speech at the CBI in November, Keir Starmer set out clearly how seriously Labour takes skills. And that's why I was delighted with Francis's agreement that Kevin Rowan has joined our Council on Skills Advisors that Keir Starmer announced in November. Because to us, success in skills policy will not be achieved without listening to and working with trade unions. Now, no one ever remarks that a political speech would have been better if it had lasted just a few minutes, but I hope you'll forgive me for just developing that theme a little more briefly before I bring my remarks to a close. I just wanted to take an example of a sector that many of you will know well, which is childcare, and that's one of the most important parts of the brief that I cover for the Labour Party. People who work in childcare are workers like the rest of us, but more than that, they're often the people who both enable others to go out to work and transform the lives of our children for the better. They do an amazing job, and perhaps more than anywhere else across the whole shadow education brief, it's where lives can be powerfully transformed for the better and changed early on. Now, one of the things that the last Labour conference saw us set out was that the next Labour government will achieve proper sectoral collective bargaining, not just in a few areas, but much more broadly, precisely because we know that unions are a key part of how we change the world of work for good and for the better. But in too many parts of our economy, and childcare is very much one of them, employment is fragmented, sometimes in the public sector, often in the private sector. Ownership is varied and opaque. Union recognition is too seldom a given. Companies go bust and money is tight. Taken together, what that means, as you will all know, is that employment conditions for childcare workers aren't just varied, but are too often just not good enough. Low pay, not enough training, contract structures that only guarantee insecurity, and too few opportunities to progress and to take on new skills. That needs to change, and under Labour, it will change. And working with Angela Rayner, our Shadow Cabinet lead on the future of work, I want collective bargaining to be a part of how that change happens. And I want to be working with all of you to make it happen and to make sure that as a country, we get it right. We want to see proper agreements across childcare, not just on pay and conditions, but on training, on standards, and on the support and recognition that people can expect and that they should and that they deserve. Because like adult social care, another sector with another similar set of structural challenges, building the framework to tackle and address these challenges will take us a long way to resolving them. Because what's needed is simple. Unions need to be treated as a partner by government, not just in learning and skills, but right across the board. A partner in building security through the strong and well-skilled public services that we need. A partner in building prosperity through the dynamic, high-skilled economy of the future. And above all, a partner in building a society based on respect for one another and for each of us, so that each of us can achieve and succeed. So I really look forward to working with you all in the years ahead, not just with Francis and Kevin and Mary, but with workplace reps right across the country. It's great to see you today, and thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Bridget. It's really great to hear you and to hear what you have to say and what Labour is proposing to do around adult learning and skills. So I've got the opportunity to question both Francis and Bridget. So that is, I feel in such a position of power. What can I ask you? Actually, I think you'll be fine with this. So I've got the questions that I've been told to ask here, but I'm going to ask a different one. So because I think it's better, because I thought of it, which is the OECD in 2015 did a survey of all the OECD countries, which found out that British workers had fewer skills when they were starting work than those who are leaving work at 65. They were the only country in the OECD which had such a low level of skills amongst its young worker population. And when asked why this was the case, Andrew Slyker, who's the head of education at the OECD, said, well, it's a lack of a coordinated, coherent system from school to work through either academic or vocational routes of developing skills. I think it's also a direct result of a school curriculum, which means that we've ended up being at the top of the rote learning league tables in the OECD. So England comes top of the memorization as a way of learning, and we do that because of the exam culture that we have, which means we put 15 and 16-year-olds through 30 hours of exams over 2 weeks, rather than thinking of a way you can assess skills and abilities. So what would Labour do, or what needs to be done in order to turn this around and to have young people leaving with more skills and then able to develop them throughout their further lives, whether they go to FE, whether they go to university, or when they go into the workplace? What do we need to be really doing? What do we need? How do we need to get a joined up system which is really well invested in, which really makes a reality of that you don't stop learning when you leave school? Because for many young people, particularly those who don't get a level 4 in their GCSEs, that is a terrible thing for their future lives, and it means it's very difficult for them to get good learning after that. So how can we help to get us to do what we all say our ambition is, which is to get a high skilled, highly productive, highly and jobs which give people life satisfaction? That's my question. I don't know who wants to go first. Bridget, you go first.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much, Mary. Wow, a lot to kind of unpack there, but I'll kind of probably go back to the start, which is, I think we first of all need to go back in terms of school education. We need to go back to what that's for and about, and that's to make sure that all young people leave school with the love of learning that can take them throughout their lives, because our learning, our education doesn't end at the point at which we leave formal education. So I think that's incredibly important. Yeah. I think there are some wider points on that I'll return to. I think in what happens thereafter, you're completely right that so many young people leave school and college without the qualifications, without the skills that they need. Part of the work that our Skills Commission will be undertaking is to look at much of that as well. And I'm really glad that Kevin Rowan is able to join us to feed into that from the trade union side as well. But I think if you look, right across the board in terms of the level of basic level skills that many workers still don't have right across our economy, in places like the North East, it's barely shifted in over a decade. And that, I believe, is directly connected to the way in which our further education sector and the opportunities that were once there for people to go back to education have been taken away. Yeah. I've seen at first hand just how much of a difference it makes where people who perhaps had a difficult time at school, or it didn't quite work out for them, were then able to go back to college, get new skills and retrain, and the way in which that can absolutely transform lives. I think there are a wider set of questions, you're right, Mary, around curriculum, around what we want for our children when they're in school. And I think that does have to be about all children getting that love of learning, having a really broad curriculum that allows them to do all of the things that are really important in our lives. Getting basic skills is essential, but also we want them to have opportunities to do sport, music, drama, all of the things that make our lives richer and fuller, and we'll be considering all of that. I'm thinking around that at the moment in terms of Labour's approach. I really look forward to working with you and your colleagues, and hopefully with any luck, coming down to your conference a bit later on this year to talk to you all about that further, because we're starting to do our thinking ahead of that for the manifesto. But you're right to push on that. I think it is a key area where, by lots of international standards, we're falling behind as a country, and that has long-term consequences for the shape of our economy, as well as for the future prospects of all of our young people as well.
Thanks, Bridget. Francis.
Mary, I don't think it's any coincidence that we see that real challenge on skills going alongside Britain being more unequal, having a bigger share of low pay, being less productive, less investment, all of that, the failure to have a proper industrial strategy. And the way, another piece of industrial vandalism in my book is the way that manufacturing has been unsupported compared to other countries. Far fewer people working in manufacturing, us becoming the kind of assembly sheds rather than, that's the risk, rather than the innovators. And producing good jobs as well as advanced manufacturing. So I think there's something about that bigger picture, that unless we get the demand for skills right, then we won't get the supply right. But I also think one of the key arguments that Unionlearn has made over many years is that we suffer from a terrible class snobbery in this country. We've argued for goodness knows how long about the failure to give the vocational route the kudos and status it deserves. And you'll now hear many Tory government ministers talking about that divide between vocational and academic learning and how we need to bridge that gap. But what are they doing about it? Because it's still the case that FE, and in particular the FE workforce, is massively underinvested in. I'm not saying HE is great, we've got UCU on strike for the pensions, and all solidarity to them, but we've got this massive class divide in the system, and I think we need to tackle that too. And again, I bring it back to, we'll hear lots of employers and government ministers talking about we can't have pay increases until we improve productivity. Well, I would turn that on its head and say we're not going to get productivity until we improve wages, terms and conditions, because as long as those bad employers find it cheaper to employ low-skilled, low-paid labour rather than invest in new tech and new kit and new equipment, then we're providing the wrong incentives. We're not going to push our way up the value chain unless we have a serious industrial strategy that includes giving unions stronger rights, workers better pay, and working people more of a voice about the kind of economy we want to live and work in.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. I think that's absolutely right. So just one further question, which isn't written down, but I'm interested in. I mean, I looked at the levelling up proposals. I was at a meeting in the DfE last week talking about levelling up proposals, and for education, they're a series of targets and a series of vague aspirations with nothing real in them. I mean, what's your reaction to those proposals? And you've both indicated what you think is needed. And I think, Francis, we need an industrial strategy. We need good jobs, which are well paid. Actually, if we had good, well paid jobs throughout the country, rather than areas of intense overgrowth and areas of work deprivation, then you would find the skills agenda really thriving. I think one of the reasons why London schools do so well is because there's great jobs in London. So even if you might be from a deprived background, you can look about you, you can see that there are opportunities which you just cannot see in Blackpool or so many areas of the country. So my question, Bridget, is, you're going to have the Skills Commission, but what's the scope of Labour's ambition? And Francis, you've talked really well about what should be the scope of ambition. I think you're right about snobbery and investment, but why can't we get more like Germany? That's the big question that everybody asks. Why can't we get more like Germany?
Mary,
do you want to go first, Francis, and then Bridget?
Can I just say that one of the big differences with Germany, and again, regardless of the colour of the government, is that they have the machinery to make it happen. And it's one of the reasons why I'm so excited about Labour's commission. It's that fundamental, it sounds simple, but my God, the number of doors that unions have to kick down even to get a fair hearing, and that's all we're asking for, is the chance to have a fair hearing and put our ideas in. As I said right at the start, furlough was a union idea, and what a difference that made to the whole country. On skills, I think we've got great ideas, because they're rooted in the real experience of our reps in workplaces. the whole point is we know what works for working people. We know when to organise learning, how to organise it, what time of the day. We know the difference it makes when you've got your workmates around you urging you on. So we've got huge wisdom to bring into the room, but so often with this government, I'm afraid, we are banging on the door. Whereas I think what Labour is signalling very strongly, in the same way that President Biden has in America, in the same way that would be absolutely routine in Germany and many other European countries, is you've got a seat at the table because your voice is important, and this won't work without the trade union movement's wisdom and practical know-how on how to make things happen, how to bring about change for the good of working people, which in turn would be good for the country.
Bridget, last word to you.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Mary. I mean, I'd agree with your analysis that it's a series of vague aspirations. There's not really anything there to back it all up. And I think what people really want, I mean, right across the country, which is where I think the levelling up rhetoric can be quite divisive, really, is that wherever you live, you should have every opportunity to get on in life, and you shouldn't have to leave where you're from in order to, realise your dreams and to see opportunity and to do well in life and to have a good, well-paid job. And I think, people in communities like mine, right across the country, want the chance really just to show what we can do with the government on our side, making it easier for that to happen. And that's where I think the role for government, is really important. Just down the road from, where I'm sitting now talking to you today, was where we, saw the birth of many of the first kind of big Stevenson projects, the big change that we saw around the Industrial Revolution. We're now on the cusp of doing something in our country where it comes to that transition to net zero, where government working with businesses, working together with trade unions, can make sure that we're actively managing that change, not just allowing things to happen, but that must involve skills right at the heart of it. And too often it feels to me that all of the talk about levelling up takes us to a discussion around, big rail projects. And I tell you, we could do with a couple of those in my part of the world. But I think unless it is about skills and about people, it won't get us to where we need to be. And if we are going to have that managed change within our economy, then we need government to be actively supporting people, to allow them to retrain, to get new skills with the big shifts that we're going to see in our economy. That's why Labour set out a £28 billion climate investment pledge that is around making that change we need to see in our economy. And skills will have to be at the heart of it, because if jobs that were once there start to fall away, government must be actively involved in supporting people to get new skills. And, I can tell you, I speak to plenty of people who want the opportunity to take on new skills, to learn new things, and they just don't know where to start, and that support is not there, and that absolutely has to change. So managing that shift around net zero, providing opportunity, well-paid, highly skilled jobs will be right at the heart of what the next Labour government will deliver, working with you as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Francis and Bridget. It's been a fantastic way to start the Unionlearn conference, and thank you for your time and for your thoughts. It's been really good. Thank you. And now I'd like to introduce Carl Roper and Kudzia Batul to the screen. Kudzia is a former primary school teacher from Derby. She's now head of qualities and strategy at the TUC. She's responsible for a number of key policy areas, including equalities, the TUC Anti-Racism Task Force and TUC strategy. And Carl is National Education and Organising Manager at the TUC.
Can you hear me okay?
I can. We can hear you, but can't see you.
Oh, you can't see me? Oh,
no, we've got to see you, Kudzia. Great. Hello.
Hi, Mary. And it was really interesting just listening to that session. So Carl and I are going to do a double act today, where I'm going to talk about basically what needs to happen in diversifying the rep space and diversifying the movement from an equalities perspective. And then the reason I love doing a two-header with Carl is he's going to give me all the solutions. Isn't that wonderful? So I want to focus on a document that we produced, my colleagues produced at the start of the pandemic, called Dying on the Job. And I'm going to refer to that today because it tells a really interesting story about the rep space, and it tells us that basically we need to have a more diverse rep space than we have currently, and that won't come as a surprise to anybody on this call. You know, we are a union, we are a workforce of women, we are a union movement filled with women, and yet when you look across leadership positions in our movement, when we look across held positions, and when we look across at structures, that overwhelming majority hasn't made the transference. And it's the same with BME members. So we have a really strong hold of BME membership in our movement, and yet we don't see the translation from membership to reps to executive roles or to senior positions. And the issues are structural, and the issues need addressing, and the issues have solutions. Now, in the document I refer to down on the job, which I would urge anybody, if they've got some time to read, because it is brilliant. And if you haven't got time to read it all, skip to the end, because the ending has key recommendations, and it has recommendations for government, it has recommendations for employers, but most tellingly of all, it has recommendations for the union movement. And what it says the union movement needs to do is we need to address the culture in unions, which hasn't been a culture that has been an inclusive culture in the past. Yes, we have fought the good fight, and yes, we have always fought for people who have been underrepresented. But as a culture representative of those members, that hasn't happened. We need increased representation at all levels across the movement, from local branches all the way up to elected structures and so forth. And I'm going to say something a little bit controversial here, Mary. You know, we need to see women and Black people not just shoved into equality officer roles, because we see that time and time and time again. And I think back to my own experience when I was branch secretary at the NASUWT. You know, someone said, oh, you can be the equality officer. I wanted branch secretary, and I didn't want to be the equality officer. You know, obviously, it's really important that we have people with lived experiences in those roles, but the reality is making those assumptions is holding people back. I'm whistling through this. I'm rattling through it because I know Carl's got a lot to say as well. We need to make sure that the work we're doing for BME members and the work we're doing for women, and can I just say, I'm referring to BME members and women specifically, but this is also inclusive of what we know about LGBT plus and disabled members as well. But we need to make sure that those cases are speedily assessed, speedily handled, and where people don't have the expertise, they can go back to their unions and get it, because currently members with a protected characteristic are often left unsatisfied with how their cases are being dealt with. And that isn't a good incentive for anyone to become active in their branches or active in their union. We need also to look at the race equality and gender equality aspects of collective bargaining. You know, we are experts at collective bargaining. It is the lifeblood of our movement. But I think we really need to perform some equality impact assessment and look at it through the lens of delivering for those members, because that is an area where we have heard time and time again, we are not making the shortfall. And we need to discuss with BME workers bargaining issues that are relevant to their experience. You know, what is it like being in the workplace? What issues are you facing? And how can we as a movement support you? And then how as a movement can we bring you on board, train and support and develop you so that we are keeping that learning? And, you know, I focused that predominantly on race and talked about the Dying on the Job report, which I think everyone should read. But there is a parallel in the work that we're doing around sexual harassment at the minute as well. And we are learning the same lessons and the same things. And ultimately, it's about building a culture where we are making it safe and open and transparent for people with protected characteristic, not only to come to us when they have an issue, but to be part of our organisations. And some of those changes are practical, you know, where are meetings held? How are meetings held? How can people access meetings? Are we capitalising on a range of ways to get people to access meetings, all the way through things like our collective bargaining issues? Carl, I'm going to bring Carl in a minute, because it's about Right, Kudzia, you've rattled off all the things that we need to do and all the problems that we have and all the issues we have, and what can we do about it? And I think it has to start with training, and it has to start with learning, and it has to start with, we've heard what members are telling us. How do we then implement that as developing what we have already? Because it's really important that the people that are already doing those learning roles, doing development roles, holding places in their branches, don't look at themselves and think, oh no, I can't be part of this. It's how do we work together? What training, what development to build a branch, to build a movement that is inclusive and diverse. Carl, are you going to jump in, or do you want me to carry on? Because I've got another 3 pages I could talk about.
Carl, you're on mute.
Yes.
Yeah.
Probably,
Come on in, Carl. I'm sure you've got something to say. We can go back to you.
It's, as you know, Mary, me being on mute is normally the best, for the best. But thanks very much, Mary. A great champion of the union role learning skills, and a great inspiration to us and me personally in your advocacy of that and the work that unions do on learning skills. I just wanted to kind of couch the very important challenge that Kudzia spoke about diversifying our rep space in terms of the wider organising challenges that our movement face, and at the end briefly just set out what the TUC is offering our reps. Obviously, the end of the Unionlearn Fund, which Francis spoke about, presents huge challenges for our movement in maintaining an effective role in learning and skills, but it does create an opportunity, and the opportunity is it really allows us the freedom to put the work we do on learning and skills at the heart of the organising agenda. And it's the first time the TUC national organiser has been invited to speak at the Unionlearn conference, I think, because we didn't really want to scare the Conservatives too much. As we know, our movement faces 3 key challenges if we're to rebuild our movement. One is membership and density. Even though union membership has risen, not inconsiderably over the last 2 or 3 years, we know we've got 18 million non-members in the private sector and 3 million non-members in the public sector. We know we need to increase the number of young workers who are starting their working lives and join unions in the early days of their working lives, so that they get the benefits of trade union membership throughout. We know we've got an ageing membership and an activist base, and as Kudzia said, even though many trade union members look like her and are younger, too many reps and activists look like me, and we need less of me and more of more young women, more people from BME backgrounds, etc. More than half of our current reps, this is the demographic time bomb that is ticking underneath our movement, in that more than 50% of our current reps are going to retire in the next 10 years. If we don't replace them, something very precious will be lost to the trade union movement, and that is workers representing each other in workplaces. It is, in a way, our unique selling point. And the third big challenge that we obviously face is to organise to scale, because we aren't going to put a dent in that 18 million non-members in the private sector and 3 million non-members in the public sector by just organising recognition agreements for 80 and 90 workers. We've really got to scale up. And part of that is how we use and utilise digital. So what is the TUC doing to support reps in building stronger unions, whether it's through learning and skills, whether it's through health and safety, or campaigns around pay and terms and conditions? Firstly, one of the big sort of spaces in the empty spaces in the offer in previous years from the TUC is allowing reps to learn how to organise in their workplaces. It's very difficult for reps to get paid time off to do organising training. So we, towards the end of last year, we launched a brand new 7-module, wholly online organising course. Any reps on here, if you want to dramatically increase your density and membership in your workplace, if you want to find new reps and activists, if you want to organise and campaign more effectively about workplace issues, get yourself on that online organising course, 7 modules, and I guarantee you, within 6 months, you and your colleagues within your branch will have a stronger, more effective union. Over the next 12 months, we'll be developing a new Union Reps website. The Union Reps website has existed for a long time. It's been very valuable. It allows reps come together to share experience, allows the TUC to share resources, and we're going to be launching a new version of that in the second half of 2022. And the third offer from us is an expanded TUC education programme. Reps on this at this conference will know that TUC Education has partnerships with colleges up and down the country in England, Wales and Scotland that offer excellent training on all aspects of being a rep. And we've supplemented that over the last 3 or 4 years with a vastly enhanced online programme, webinars and online courses of various lengths on issues as diverse and as important as sexual harassment, dealing with COVID and the pandemic, harmful gambling, supporting learners, obviously, and supporting non-binary workers. And just a shout out as well, if I may, Mary, for our brand new course on a more recognisable trade union response to dealing with mental health. We believe that the TUC's offer on mental health is being good, but it's not just about first aid. Mental health first aid is a reaction to mental health problems. We want to use trade union strength and power to stop mental health becoming an issue in workplaces. So we've written a new course called Resistance, Not Resilience. We're piloting it in 5 TUC education centres at the moment, and we'll be rolling it out nationally. As I say, it's a collective trade union response to this very important. Just to finish off, Mary, we all know that our movement is an idea. Collective worker representation is an idea that's lit up the world for 2 centuries. It falls on our shoulders in this country, in many ways the home of the trade union movement, to rebuild and reignite ourselves. And that's what we need to do. And we need to put learning and skills at the heart of that agenda. I thank you for allowing me to speak. I thank people for attending this conference. Enjoy the rest of Heart Unions Week. 2 challenges: recruit a member, find a new rep, and solidarity to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Kuzia, do you want to finish off?
Following Carl's always incredibly difficult because he says it all so well. And what I would say is, I'm a teacher, so what I'm going to say is entirely predictable, and that is that education and learning is absolutely key. And we have to make sure that we are, really accessing the resources as outlined by Carl, but also using our networks to make sure that we're connecting people to those resources, that we're being more deliberate in the actions we take, because that rep event horizon that Carl outlined, where people are going to retire, isn't far away. It is literally around the corner, and we've got a key opportunity here to shape that in the way that we think better represents and really fairly represents the people that do the work of this country. So I would say, let's get out there, let's get the people on this course are absolutely key place to get out there, get looking and see where those gaps are in their own branches, in their own opportunities, and reach out to us if you need anything. That's what we're here for. And join a union. If you haven't already, just say it loud and clear to everybody that will listen. Join a union, get active, get learning.
Great. Join a union, get active and get learning. And we've had, so that's absolutely right. From Kudzi, we've had the very strong reminder that at the moment, both in our professional staff, but also in the lay structures of the unions, we do not represent accurately or fully the diversity of the workplace. And we need to do a lot more about that. And from Carl, we've had a brilliant reminder about what the TUC can offer in terms of supporting branches and reps to have an organising approach in their workplace, and to gain more members and to gain more activists within the union. And that will have 2 really, for me, key outcomes. The first is that you strengthen the union in the workplace, so the union is able to be more effective and to be shown to be more effective. That's really key. And secondly, that the union looks more like its membership. Now, my union, the National Education Union, 78% of its membership are women. Now, that is not reckoned. That is not equalled in the lay structures of the union. It's not proper proportions at the executive. We're doing much better actually on Black activists and on LGBT plus, but women, it's an issue. So every union, so what we've done in the NEU is we've done an audit of our reps, audit of, you know, what equality according to equality characteristics, and that gives you a baseline on which to say how you need to develop. And it's really important you know where your union is and what it needs to do in order to be stronger, but to represent and show in its representative structures that it looks like and feels like it's the workers it represents. And there's just one more thing I would say, which is this. You know, it's possible to be left-wing and a woman. It's possible to be charismatic and a woman. It's possible to be determined and a woman. These are not characteristics which are the preserve of one gender. Women can be those things too. And so, you know, we need to make our unions look like our membership, represent our membership, and listen carefully to the issues the members want to improve in the workplace, because they might, you know, we might not be fighting always on the right ground, and we need to do that. So thank you so much, both of you. It's been a real pleasure. And you know, thanks for your time, both Kudsia and Carl. Thank you. And now we're moving on to the panel discussion. And the topic for our panel members is Union Learning, the landscape after COVID-19 and the Union Learning Fund. And I'd like to welcome our panel members today. So first of all, I'd like to welcome Sarah Woolley, who's the General Secretary of the Bakers, Food and Allied Workers Union, the first woman to take up that position. The union represents workers throughout the food industry and has lifelong education at the heart of its work. And Sarah, we talked before, it's fantastic to see you again. We're really looking forward to what you have to say. Next on the screen is Sidra Nizla, and Sidra is Head of Community Learn for Community Union. She managed the ULF project in Coventry for 4 years. She managed the ULF project for Community for 4 years. Following the end of the ULF fund, Community continued to provide education and training services for members and non-members, depending on individual cases. Sidra is also leading on settling the agenda and future visioning of established community union in the community. So establishing the union in the community. So that's Sidra. And then we've got Teresa, who is the Head of Unison Learning and Organising Services. And Teresa is responsible for implementing Unison's activist and member education programme across the UK. She's done this for nearly 30, she's been involved in the union movement for nearly 30 years as an activist, an organiser and a manager in a region. And she has experienced firsthand the valuable role trade union education has played to support and empower individual members and to build strong and organised unions. And then I'd like to welcome Steve Croak. Steve is currently the Regional Lead for Education, Learning and Training in the Midlands at the CWU. He's also the Chair of the TUC Midlands ULR Forum and is the Lead ULR of the CWU South Midlands Postal Branch with over 5,000 members. Steve's also a tutor working for Ruskin College, delivering training courses for CWU for representatives. So welcome all. I'm delighted to see you all. Now, the first bit of this, I think you might have prepared. I hope you've been given advance notice. You've got 3 minutes each, and I'm going to stick to 3 minutes with each of you. So you know, get your stopwatches running, and I will too. But we'd like to know what your role is in the organisation, what you did and what your union did about union learning during the pandemic, and what has been the effect of scrapping the fund on you. But the first two really are the most important, because that's really focusing on the positive work that you're doing. So we'll start with Sarah.
Thanks, Mary, and good morning, everyone. I'm very proud to be the General Secretary of the Bakers, Food and Allied Workers Union, and as you said, Mary, the first female to take up that position. And I'm hoping, just following on from the last discussion, that encourages more of our female members to take up prominent roles in our trade union, because we're not reflective, unfortunately, at the minute in terms of positions versus our membership. And as you also said, we represent members working throughout the food industry, all the really good healthy products, Greggs, Warburton's, Mr. Kipling's, Fox's Biscuits, all those really nice juicy products that aren't very good for you health-wise, but you know, we all deserve a treat, especially after the last couple of years. And my background beforehand was I worked at Greggs before becoming a union official, and in fact all of our officials come from within our industry. When we first went into lockdown, union learning, as I'm sure everybody faced, had to very quickly adapt to online provisions only. Our distance learning courses numbers just went through the roof, and our project teams across the 4 nations were absolutely fantastic. They worked so hard to keep in contact with members who were struggling with furlough, that were keen to develop themselves, needed the opportunity to keep their minds busy whilst work wasn't an option. Those who took the opportunity to look at changing careers, wanted to develop themselves for promotions at work, and those that just wanted to learn a new skill. Each project did a phenomenal job at supporting these learners from a distance and made sure that we continued to have provisions throughout. And that's why it was so devastating when the government decided to scrap the fund in England, because our relatively small project in comparison to others employed 5 project workers who on average helped over 3,000 people a year. And that increased during the pandemic with the online provision. And developing through maths and English and IT skills. You know, many of our members left school with little to no qualifications, and it was a real good avenue for them to turn to develop themselves. Obviously, they offered a redundancy support service that is second to none, which we've needed throughout the pandemic as well. And supporting people with their mental health, you know, there's never been more important time through the pandemic where people have been struggling and haven't necessarily had anywhere to go, and our learning services really stepped up and supported them. I think we're really lucky that we've still got the projects in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland, and they're still going strong, but I really do think as a union movement we dropped the ball. We're not fighting hard enough to keep the project in England, and it is disappointing that we are where we are with it, but it's not going to stop us, as Min mentioned before. We will still continue supporting our ULRs and supporting our members learn, because it's really important.
Thanks, Sarah. I think we did everything we could actually to try and stop Gavin Williamson doing a stupid thing. I think we have to understand that, you know, we put evidence in front of him. I even spoke to the Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, and said this was an act of vandalism. It had no basis in reality. But that was it. He was determined to do it. And the reasons he cancelled, the reason we kept it in Scotland and Wales is because they listened to the evidence. We have to understand the reason why Gavin Williamson cut the funding was not because of any argument we didn't make. He cut the funding as a political act in order to throw red meat to the Tories. And, you know, we have in Scotland a social democratic government. We have in Wales the Welsh Labour government. We're facing a right-wing dysfunctional rabble who, you know, will do anything to wage a war on work and a war on unions. And union learning was a casualty of that. So it's great to hear what you're still able to do in your union in order to support workers and their learning. So can we go to Sidra next and talking about your working community?
Morning, everyone. I concur with many of the points made by Sarah in terms of the union learning during the pandemic. So initially the fight through against the COVID, it led to a number of cancellations of several courses we had up and down the country, but we were able to act fast and move to online delivery where possible. Online learning, I would say, definitely was facilitated and made possible through the ULF project, through our learning organisers. For example, those that were digitally isolated were only able to access our learning hubs, again, that have been built through the project up and down the country. And learners were actually borrowing equipment from the learning hub to get online. That actually was quite valuable to them, because not only was it helping them to learn, but also get on with their life, for example, have their appointments online, etc. Some of the learners who, and not all of those people were our members, they were just general members from the community who had access to a learning hub. So they were getting in touch with the learning centres and more or less asking to borrow a certain piece of equipment. And we did allow them to take it away for a certain period of time. and they didn't know how to, for example, use the equipment, but the because through the ULF fund, again, we have the learning organisers who were able to explain the process of, for example, getting online, setting up WhatsApp groups to teach people how to actually get online and stay safe online. And I think with regards to the ULF fund being strapped, it's had a huge impact. I think it has ended union brokered learning for many unions, and it's reduced the provision of our learning services in certain areas. So for example, I think predominantly what it does is it's ended the ULF. The end of the ULF has effectively undermined key government skills and retraining priorities, a crucial moment for our economy with us going through the COVID. I mean, we as a community, as a union, believes that this was, a decision that was counterproductive, and it should still be reversed, because the opportunities that we were able to provide through the England Learning Fund, we just simply cannot provide as a union. We do not have the funds, we do not have the cash inflow to continue with those services. But as a union, I think we're one of those unions where, fortunate enough to say, our General Secretary was very committed to the learning and education agenda. So we've continued to provision of those services, so they have more or less been automated. So a lot of the services are online. So we are continuing with the provision of the learning services, which is good. But overall, if you ask myself in terms of some of the work that we've done through the ULF project and some of the communities that we've reached, which are the most vulnerable and disadvantaged, I think that's the removal of the ULF has a huge impact on actually those services.
Yeah, you can't pretend that it doesn't. You do what you can, but you can't pretend anything other than the loss of the ULF. It's 12 million a year. It's a pinprick. And yet unions could do so much good work with it. Anyhow, let's not indulge too much in grief, and let's move on to Steve Croak. Steve, tell us about your work.
Good morning, conference. Thank you for inviting me along to speak. There was a real air of optimism during the last general election with the Labour Party manifesto, which contained proposals for a national education service with the potential to develop cradle to grave system of education, but the Conservatives won that election, as we're all very aware. And also the pandemic came along very shortly afterwards as well. And that, as a trade union, we had to change the way we did things overnight. And we had to adapt, and we had to look at new ways of delivering union learning. And we accelerated greatly during the pandemic, using new technology and online platforms like Zoom, GoToMeetings, etc. And they're now routinely used. I think we all struggled to begin with online platforms, but we're now very used to them. And there's also strong evidence that our activist online training now attracts certainly a lot more women and a lot more young workers. I'm currently tutoring a course at the moment with 3 young workers and 4 women's officers on. And that to me is truly wonderful. We're now attracting a greater audience. And now we can adapt very quickly. Should another pandemic or lockdown happen, we can go from classroom online almost immediately. And the loss of the ULF has had a significant impact on a number of projects that the Communication Workers Union were planning, where we were hoping to expand our learning out the workplace and into communities. However, we've got regional networks we've already built to sustain learning beyond the Union Learning Fund and continue to offer learning opportunities in the workplace. We have huge support from our Equality, Education and Development Department, as well as branches and regions and regional offices. And we also continue to have good release facilities for our own Union Learning reps and continued support for our workplace learning centres that have been pretty much closed for a long time are now beginning to reopen. In Coventry, we have a fantastic facility that we've not been able to really utilise, and we're hoping to start community learning there as well as activist training. So I'll stop.
Thank you, Steve. That's really helpful. And I do think as we move out of the COVID measures and the pandemic, the opportunity to start working with members face to face again, and because remote learning definitely has its place, but there is something you cannot replace about in-person teaching and learning. It is irreplaceable. And I know that as a teacher myself, that, you know, we learn in a community of learners. It's not just about the individual, it's about how you learn with others, what you learn from others, as well as what you learn from your own study and whoever is teaching you. And so, Teresa, last but definitely not least, we're really looking forward to hearing from you.
Hello, good morning. Thank you, Mary. My name's Teresa Donegan. I'm the Head of Learning and Organising Services here at Unionlearn, based in London. But I work with regional education staff across our 12 regions, with branches. Absolutely invaluable, the work we do for ULRs and other education activists we have. So like all of you, when the pandemic hit us, we had to adapt very, very quickly and move all our member learning and activist training programs online. And we were able to do that. We were able to do that with the help of colleagues at the TUC, with the amazing staff we have, with the ULRs, and with also the number of providers that we're lucky enough to work with. We, at the start of the pandemic, we'd already been rolling out and we did offer a limited range of online self-directed learning workshops and resources. And we were used to using the webinar format. But if anybody had said 2 years ago that the numbers participating in learning will be at the levels that they were in 2020 and have subsequently even gone higher during 21, the reach of enabling young workers, disabled workers, women workers to actually participate in learning, and those volumes of numbers, I would not have believed it. And I think also what we've also learned and been able to do during the pandemic is understand and utilise learning online to bring it to new heights. So what we were also very lucky to do was actually adapt a lot of our traditional, what would have been traditional classroom workshops and courses, adapt those resources to be delivered virtually. I do want to make the difference, because self-directed online learning, we had been experimenting that, and that is absolutely perfect for some learners. But what we were finding is that the majority of our members wanted more interaction, wanted inclusivity, wanted to be able to replicate, not the perfect replication, but wanted to be able to replicate those kind of discussions, particularly around activist education where it's vital. So we were able to adapt and be a lot more creative, a lot more flexible, and a lot more inclusive, using platforms as mentioned like Zoom and Teams, and also tools such as Slido and polls. And I think going forward, there's been lots of positives we've learned about delivering learning online, and we're definitely going to retain them. But as mentioned, not forgetting that there are also many learners that may not have been able to engage with us over the last couple of years. You know, not everybody has the digital skills or the digital devices, and that's where ULF came into its own in terms of being able to support access to buying equipment, working with employers, reaching hard to reach learners and engage them in learning. So we will be returning to face-to-face, but we will continue with the online learning that we've developed over the last couple of years. And then one thing on the ULF, I mean, scrapping it, I'll echo the comments of colleagues and what Francis and other speakers have said. It was an absolutely vindictive, ridiculous decision. The engagement we had with traditionally hard to reach learners, with employers, the support that the ULF gave and provided. No other kind of organisation can run ULF projects that would reach those kind of learners and engage and encourage with them. It was completely vindictive. It has left gaps. Our ULF project workers that we were employed were absolutely fantastic. Many of them have retained the status and some areas of time off as ULRs, but they did a fantastic work. It's left gaps, and we are doing our best to make up those gaps. And I think what we need to do is to campaign, as referenced earlier, for a properly education, a national education system that really brings forward lifelong learning. We need to campaign hard to reinstate the ULF And hopefully that is something we will all be able to achieve, because the benefits ULF brought are absolutely overwhelmingly over evidence. And I hope this government will change its mind, but if not, we campaign with the Labour government.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Teresa. Unfortunately, there isn't time for any sort of more discussion, but having heard your stories of your unions and what you have done throughout the pandemic and what you are continuing to do to ensure that learning is available and ready for your members so that they are able to progress at their work and progress in their lives, that is just fantastic. So Sarah, Sidra, Steve and Teresa, thank you very much. It's been wonderful to hear. It's great to have that diversity of stories from unions serving such different sectors of the workplace, talking about one thing you all have in common, which is the importance of learning. So thank you very much, and thank you for your time today. And so as they go off, I'd now like to introduce Simon Parkinson to the screen. Simon tweeted that everybody had said everything he was going to say, but I don't believe that that's true. I don't absolutely believe that, Simon, we have said everything you're going to say. Simon is the Chief CEO and General Secretary of the WEA, the leading adult education charity. He joined the WEA from the Croak College, where he was Principal and CEO for 4 years. Previously worked for 19 years at the Royal Mencap Society, including as Director of Education, Learning and Work. Simon's involved in a range of networks and organisations, both nationally and internationally. He grew up in Salford, which is very close to my home. I grew up in Bolton. Simon left school at 16, but returned to learning as an adult and attended both Salford University and Warwick University, where he gained a master's degree in public administration. Simon, we're delighted that you're going to speak to us today, and welcome.
Thanks, Mary. Delighted to be here. And yeah, no, seriously, really worried that what I've got for you in terms of a presentation now is probably best a recap on the great conversations that have already happened this morning. So I will share the screen and talk through some slides with you. As I say, hopefully this will recap and build on what we've already heard this morning. So hopefully you can see my screen. Just make that full view. There we go. Perfect. So again, just echo the thoughts that everybody's had really about the acting of the Union Learning Fund. We gave evidence to the Education Select Committee to say what it was, which was a very short-sighted political stunt. So we've been there from the start. We've been part of that campaign. But actually, as Mary's been saying, at the moment we are where we are in England. So let's look forward and let's see if there's a way that we can actually build and work on all the great ideas that we've heard already this morning. So a little bit of a recap, on where I think we are, and again, you will have heard this. There's no doubt that the interest and participation in adult learning increased during lockdowns, both formal, informal. There was that Joe Wicks effect that people may remember from the first lockdown, people, exercising online. So it did accelerate the use of digital learning technologies as well, at the same time exposing those issues that, had gone under the radar a little bit around digital poverty and digital skills. People, if they're choosing to put money in the gas meter or food on the table, how are they going to buy data? So how are they going to access, the digital learning that's out there? So we're seeing that real desire now, as Mary's alluded to as well, to return to venue-based community learning. But a lot of the venues, they weren't as well supported through the pandemic, and we've seen many community venues close. I think there's a real opportunity for the union movement here. We've heard about some of the venues and the community learning spaces you've got. Steve just mentioned one for CWU. I think there's a real opportunity for unions, not just to use these venues for member education, but to open them up wider. So I think blended learning's here to stay. I think levelling up, as Bridget alluded to, as a term, is uncertain. I think it's highly linked to the current Johnson administration, and I think we probably need to find a different way of describing what we know is needed across the country, which our communities, need more investment, need a lot more support. But I wonder whether levelling up lasts as a terminology. There is that political focus on skills, which you could argue is good, but it's quite narrow. It's on technical skills, level 3, so the funding is following that, and that's leaving gaps. Devolution is here to stay, and there are some positives in that. You've heard about the good work of some of the metro mayors and MCAs. There are challenges with it as well, though, because it's creating gaps in provision and bits of postcode lotteries around what people can access. UK SPF is a good start, probably multiplying. I'll talk about that a little bit more. But this devolved funding down to third-tier authorities, it's just salami slicing the funding so fine that we're going to have to work out how we can really engage at that very local level. And again, unions would be massively well placed to do that. So how do you get alongside some of those unitary authorities that are now going to be given money that they can use for people and skills? And then finally, just a couple of things. I think language around this is really important. I mean, if you're a hipster digital native, then the idea of going to a garage or a boot camp is probably floats your boat. But if you're a mid-career person looking to reskill, or to improve your numeracy and literacy, and you're told you're going to be sent to a boot camp, I'm not sure that's the right phraseology. That's not going to engage the members, the adults that we know. And I think alongside that, community learning is misunderstood and misrepresented. It is key to developing essential skills. I think, again, we need to change the language. It's essential skills, not basic skills. And it's essential skills through lifelong learning. So just a couple of thoughts on that. If we look at the links now, you will know this, that top one, that member education around organising rights and responsibilities, rights and representations and advocacy, that's your core offer through trade union reps and Unionlearn. I want to just explore 4 other points: that confidence building and essential skills, possibly to help your succession planning, which has been spoken about today. Some information, advice and guidance pieces. We talked about redundancy being the last resort, but what about those that are at risk of redundancy? And then just a couple of thoughts around essential skills going forward and reimagining this, politics, philosophy and economics and wider cultural studies that get lost sometimes in the drive towards skills. So that confidence building, if we're thinking about how you succession plan for your union reps and your learning reps, what we know is that the key to that is building those essential skills. So supporting people with their numeracy, literacy, ESOL, digital skills, so that they're much more confident to then take on some of these leadership roles and some of these advocacy roles that you're absolutely right to try and talk about succession planning. You've mentioned it, the key to this is in trusted environments, deep understanding, and you and your reps have got deep understanding of what members want and need in terms of learning. We can be flexible in the time and content of that learning. Through working with providers like the WEA, there is potential to access that state funding up to level 3. So actually, how do we do that? How do we work in partnership? And it was great to see the panel session before. We work closely with community, CWU, Unison. Sarah, we probably need to pick up the conversation that we had about bakers as well. So we're here, we're ready to work with you on that and really explore it. We're cut from the same cloth. We share the same history. We are the Workers' Educational Association and want to be a big part of working with you going forward. This risk of redundancy, and this is a project that we're doing with community, the union, so that early intervention, trying to get that advice, information and guidance up there. I think you're right, employers, unions now need to find the funding for that part. But actually, again, the reskilling part, we think we can access state funding for. So something there that I think we've already touched on. And then just 2 final slides from me. The focus on skills at the moment is on a very narrow level 3 technical qualifications. And actually it's at best skilling workers or reskilling workers for the jobs of today, not the jobs of tomorrow. And I just picked this from Hayes, and there's also something from the World Economic Forum. And I've deliberately crossed out the word soft in terms of skills, because I don't think they are soft skills. I think these are essential skills and, really, really important. And Mary, I think it goes to your point about connecting up school, work, higher education. These are the skills that we should be teaching children. This is the, getting that culture about lifelong learning. Less focus on that regurgitation and memorization, as you say, and actually just encouraging people to look at these. These are the hard skills going forward, and I think the union movement's in a really good position to explore this and help to provide the type of provision that can really produce those skills for members. And then finally, there's that wider piece of education as well. And this is something that we're doing with the GFTU, but we're also talking to TUC and others around this, in that there is a whole history of the working class movement. And actually, again, in terms of your succession planning, in terms of engaging younger members from different backgrounds, how do we remind them and how do we educate them in terms of, there's a different political narrative, there's a different philosophic and economic narrative that we could put out there, but actually people need to understand that, and they need to, be reminded of that. And again, I think there is a role for member education and adult education in doing that, and that's wider than just the skills agenda that we currently, are seen to be locked into. So as I say, Mary, I'm not at all sure there's anything new there that we've not already discussed this morning, but hopefully it's a bit of a recap and consolidation of what we've already talked about.
I think there was an awful lot that was really new there, and I think you focused our discussions really well. I think my takeaways from that are, I absolutely agree with you about hard skills, about adaptability, willingness to learn, emotional intelligence, problem solving, creativity, and I can't read the one I wrote down, communication. So absolutely, I think the reminding that we can work with the WAA for level 3 courses, that's really helpful, and a reminder of the unions that you're working with. So that's really, really good. And just a sort of a very, I think, very measured look at what we achieved during lockdown, but the fact, we do want to go back to in-person learning, but many of the venues are closed down. We are going to need to continue to do a blended approach. And finally, just a huge endorsement of the dignity of learning and the dignity of skills. And we don't want a narrow instrumentalist approach, which, as you say, prepares people for jobs which are currently there or gone, but we want to, which prepares for the new jobs. So thank you so much, Simon. It's really great to have heard from you, and please be assured you gave us something quite new and quite different to the discussion. It was lovely to hear from you and to see you. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
And now I'd like to introduce James Whithey. James is the author of 5 books about mental health, including his best-selling How to Tell Depression to Piss Off, and his latest, How to Tell Anxiety to Sod Off, which, James, when I was looking through the notes for this conference yesterday, you will be glad to know I have ordered your book because I'm a sufferer from anxiety and I would like to tell it to sod off. So it's published in January this year and I'm really looking forward to it. These books have been published in 7 languages and in 6 different countries across the world. He's the founder of the Recovery Letters Project, which publishes letters from people recovering from depression addressed to people experiencing depression. He lives with anxiety, depression, OCD, and post-traumatic stress disorder. James lives in Hove with his husband and an emotionally damaged cat. So, James, really looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Mary. Very much indeed, Mary. It's lovely to be with you all. Yes, as Mary was saying, I'm an author of 5 books about mental health, but I live with mental health. I live with anxiety and depression, PTSD and OCD, and basically I have the kind of mental health t-shirt. So if there were a t-shirt, then I would definitely have it. I have ongoing support around my mental health with a psychiatrist. I've spent time in a psychiatric hospital. And it's something that I live with on a daily basis. So the title of this talk is kind of getting back to a new normal. So what we have to acknowledge is the deep impact that the pandemic has had on our mental health. And one of the things that actually it has brought forward for so many of us is the impact on our mental health, whether we have pre-existing mental health conditions or not. everybody has been impacted by their mental health. So we are moving into, hopefully, a kind of a new normal, moving away from isolation and moving back into our workplace. So I'm going to talk a bit about what it was like for me when I came back to work after working from home, what that was like, the mental health struggles with that. And I'm also going to then chat about, well, then how do we adjust? What do we do? What is helpful to do when we're readjusting to trying to get back to some kind of normal? So when I look back at lockdown, if we look at our lockdowns, there was something actually for me quite reassuring about lockdown, because we kind of knew where we were. So we were only allowed out at certain times for certain periods of time. And even though it was restricted, there was a certain there was a boundary around that was relatively safe, because we knew what we could and could not do. As things have started to open up, things have got more uncertain. And it's kind of like, well, do I put a mask on in this shop? Do I not? Or do I do it on a train? What do I not? And with that uncertainty brings up a lot of discomfort and can trigger a lot of our mental health problems. So when I first went back to work, I was incredibly anxious, very, very anxious. So I'd had a period of working from home and being at home, and then suddenly I was out into the world and into a kind of scary world, genuinely scary. I was thinking, well, am I going to get COVID? How is it going to work? What are the people going to be doing? Are they going to be wearing masks? Really incredibly difficult, especially my anxiety on trains really, really escalated massively. So I would kind of move seats if people weren't wearing a mask, and then sometimes I ended up moving seats about 4 or 5 times. I think it was only a 20-minute journey. I would keep washing my hands with hand sanitizer, and then realizing that I'm just washing my hands too much, my hands would get dry, and then just a series of anxieties about what I would do, what would happen to me. Would I catch something? Would I catch COVID? If I caught COVID, then what would happen? Would I not be able to work? And then what I do a lot, which is kind of catastrophizing and going, oh, so if this happens, then that might happen, then that might happen, and going to the end point, the worst case scenario, which is something that happens a lot when we experience anxiety. So it usually ends up with me unemployed on the streets. It's usually where it ends up. So it was kind of going back into a kind of chaos, and that kind of chaos felt incredibly difficult. So at work, I then noticed that I was washing my hands loads. So I work part-time in the library, so which is where I am at the moment, and then I write part-time. So I was back in the library, and washing my hands continually, and washing my hands, and because I have to handle books, I was then getting worried about that. And then I found myself washing my hands way too much. And again, my hands were getting dry, and it was getting difficult. And again, I was catastrophizing: am I going to get bugs? So somehow, when I was at home and just working on my laptop, that felt okay, and I could regulate things. But suddenly, I'm out and I'm with colleagues and I'm with the general public, and there are many things that I cannot control, and that felt very difficult. Now, when we think about it, the pandemic has been about lots of things, but in terms of our mental health, it's been about loss. And it's just worth thinking about that for a second, because it has been about the loss of so many things. I just want you to just take a second just to think about the things that you have lost, because it's really important to think about that. So I know for me, it's been about loss of contact with people. So not seeing people, not seeing family and friends for, sometimes years. I hadn't seen my mum for years, and that has a profound impact. But also loss of social contact with friends, loss of routine, loss of colleague contact, a loss of going into my workplace where I felt safe and I knew what was going on, and suddenly I was working from home and I was like, well, I've never done this before. But also loss of stability, loss of security. People have lost jobs, as we know. We've already been talking about that. Loss of faith in people as well. Be that from other people not abiding by the rules, or the government, however we want to think about it. Loss of hobbies and interests that we couldn't do. Loss of social contact. The loss is massive. And we really have to acknowledge the loss that we've gone through in order to process this stuff. So if you're re-entering your workplace, you're getting back in the car and back on the train, you might also be experiencing the loss of not now working from home because you've got used to working from home. And that is a loss in itself as well. So just acknowledging those losses is really important, because if we push all those to one side, then that's actually not going to do us any favors at all. It's much healthier from a mental health and well-being point of view to say, actually, there have been loads of losses that I've gone through, and name them and say what they've been. And actually, there's also a collective loss, a loss of society as a whole of the things that we could no longer do. And hopefully some of that's changing. But loss, along like bereavement and the grief process, takes time to process. So I've been a great advocate throughout the pandemic in terms of mental health, the importance of feeling those feelings and not pushing down those feelings, and crying if we need to cry. So I would tweet a lot during lockdowns about the importance of crying. That, because loss is about, makes us feel sad and makes us feel like crying. And we're still taught a lot of the time about having to stay together and being resilient. And if there's one word that I find the most abhorrent within mental health at the moment, it's about resilience. Because actually what's much healthier is to feel those feelings. We don't need to stay strong. It's okay to say that we're not managing. That's really important. We are going through a pandemic that is huge, that is absolutely massive. So we have to think about those in those terms. We have to think about it in terms of, well, actually, nothing as huge as this has happened since World War II. We think about it on a global scale. And that's how big it is. And because we've all been sort of getting through somehow, we kind of think, oh, things are okay. They're not. This has had a profound effect on them. So let's move into sort of how we adjust and what we do about those. Firstly, those feelings of struggling, those feelings of, all right, I now have to reorganize my diary and who's going to collect kids, and actually how I do a shopping. I used to do that on a Wednesday when I work from home, and now I'm going into the office and I have to reorganize it. Is difficult. Thinking about going back into the office and going, well, how are my colleagues going to be? How's that going to work? How am I going to adjust to being back in the workplace? How is that? How am I going to be with that? It is okay to struggle with that. And it is normal to struggle with that because that is change. So we've been through these huge series of massive, massive changes. And please, please, please be easy on yourself. And what I mean by that is kind of look after your mental well-being. So that is going to include not giving yourself a hard time. So we are our own worst self-critic. So we say to ourselves constantly, I should be okay with this. I should be fine. I should be managing. Look, other people seem to be on the train and they look absolutely fine. Why aren't I okay? That's not helpful. It's not helpful. And it's also not true, because there isn't one of us that hasn't struggled with this at each and every stage. And we are then also now struggling with going back to our workplaces and another change and adjusting again. And those adjustments has an impact. So yes, one of the things that I did was to take things very, very, very slowly as I re-entered the workplace. So when I got on the train for the first time, that was difficult. So actually I measured it in really small chunks, very small chunks. So I got out of bed, and I got my bag ready for work, and I got on the train, and then I left the train and I got to work. But had I gone, oh my goodness, I need to get on the train to work, and this is the first time I've been on a train in months, and who's going to be there? And if I escalated all that stuff and catastrophized again, then it would have felt overwhelming. But what I did instead was took it in very, very, very small chunks. Right, I'll get up, I'll walk from my house to the station, and I'll get that far, and I'll just check in and see how I'm doing then. And then I'll get on the train, I'll put my mask on, and so on and so on. And do it in really, really, really gradual steps, and not saying to yourself, "Oh, this is ridiculous. Why aren't I okay with this? Why am I struggling?" I don't want you to say to yourself. I want you to say to yourself, "It is normal to struggle in a pandemic," and it's really worth repeating that. It is normal to struggle in a pandemic. really important, because unless you say that to yourself, you're going to start giving yourself a hard time. Now, once I did that, once I did those small chunks, and I kept repeating that, and I went to work the next day and the next day, it gradually got easier. It did gradually get easier. It really did. It was kind of like exposure therapy. As I did it more and more, and I learned that I could do it, and nothing disastrous happened, then it got easier. When anything that we keep repeating, it eventually gets easier to do. So know that if you're struggling to get back to the workplace, it will get easier when we keep repeating that. But if we do it in small chunks, okay, the small chunks is really important, and the not giving yourself a hard time. Also realizing that we can only control our own behavior, not other people's. So I was on the train going, I can't believe this person isn't wearing a mask. I can't believe it. This is when we had to wear a mask. I still wear a mask, but this is when you had to wear a mask. And I would get really, really, really frustrated. But I would then have to say to myself, well, what do I have control of? And what I had control of was I could move. I could do that. So I can move, I moved carriages, but I didn't have control whether someone else was going to put a mask on. I mean, I really did. There's nothing I can do about that. You know, you're not allowed to go and forcibly put on a mask on. That is wrong. You can't do that. So realizing that you have control over your actions, but you don't have control over other people's, is really important. You can only control your own sphere of influence. The other thing that I did when I got back to work is that I made time with colleagues talking about the difficulties of getting back into the workplace, what it was like being back, what it was like getting the train or getting the car and parking again and trying to find a car place and all that kind of stuff. Talking to other people, because often when we talk about our struggles and our mental health difficulties, other people go, oh my goodness, me too. And you know what? I really struggled because I haven't seen my dad for 2 years, or I haven't seen my nieces and nephews, or I haven't managed to have a break, or yeah, actually coming in and working again back in the office is really strange, isn't it? We need that validation from others, and we need that support from others, because we are all going through a similar process, not the same process, but a similar process. So I would encourage you to speak to your colleagues and open up that conversation around what it's been like during the pandemic, what it's been like working from home, what's it like now you're back in the office. You may not be back full time, you may just be in 1 or 2 days. But what that experience is like, that's really, really important. And also know that, you know, hopefully there are support systems in place for you, so there's occupational health and hopefully counselling services, and use those services. So often we say to ourselves, you know, actually, no, I'm fine. But actually, we don't need to be fine. You know, it's much healthier to go, I'm struggling, I need a bit of support. And that's why those systems are there. So take up the offer of those systems. So yes, the other thing that I did that was really important as I was moving back into this new normal is made connections. So connections is really important. So when we have loss and things have changed, one of the things that we need to do is reconnect back to things. Now that things are changing and open up a bit more, I want you to think about connections. Now those connections can be lots of things. So they can be reconnecting with your colleagues and, you know, having lunch together or having a coffee together or talking about bake-off, you know, at break time, wherever it might be. But those connections are vital. We are human beings, and we are social creatures. We like to have that connection, so talk to each other. But it be connections with other things too. So it can be connections with an animal or nature, or just connecting with kind of who you are through mindfulness or meditation. But that connection will kind of ground you in this ever-changing world that we're kind of living in. So yeah, just to kind of recap, the pandemic has been about loss. We have experienced loss. It's important to acknowledge those losses. And then when we get back to work, we need to say to ourselves, this is normal. We need to take things at a slow pace, at chunks of time. We need to get support, and we need to connect to ourselves and to other people as a way through. Thank you very much.
I'm not so fantastic. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, James. That was such profoundly thoughtful, sensitive and sensible advice around our humanity and the fact that, you know, don't believe that everybody else is fine. It's, you know, and then really practical advice about if it's something that's hard and a challenge, split it into its components parts. I've learned to do that. And if you do that, it makes each bit a bit more manageable. You've done this bit, you had a bit of success, you can go on to the next bit and then the next bit and the next bit and not be overwhelmed by what's facing you. I found that really, really so helpful and so human. And thank you very much. Thank you for sharing your own challenges, and just say that many of us listening to you feel those challenges as well. I think the worst thing about mental health issues is that you just think they're yours alone, but they're not. They challenge all of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. I feel quite emotional actually after that. I feel that so many of the challenges that we face moving from the pandemic have been so clearly expressed by James and given us ways of coping with them. And he does write. So if you found his work useful, then do order his books, as I have. And I'm really, How to Tell Anxiety to Sod Off is being delivered today. So that's really great. Our next speaker, and it's our final speaker, is Andrew Dean. Andrew is Head of Regional Engagement at the University of Exeter, and he's a specialist in the topics of employment, skills, the labour market, monitoring and impact. In 2019, he led a major research project with Unison to explore union members' skills needs. Andrew worked with the TUC since the early days of Unionlearn, and is helping deliver one project on midlife skills reviews and another on the impact of COVID-19 on digital skills needs in the arts and culture and the care sectors. So Andrew, we're delighted that you're our last speaker, and we're really looking forward to what you've got to say to us.
Hello there. It's a real pleasure to join Unionlearn conference. I've been to a few of these, and I think the last time we spoke, we followed an excellent comedian, and it was just impossible to kind of get any attention to what we were doing. And now we're following that really, really passionate and really excellent presentation. But if I could start by echoing so many comments that we've had about the appalling decision about the Union Learning Fund in England. I've worked with TUC on kind of economic impact studies in the past on the Union Learning Fund, and it very much more than paid its own way. And it's been extremely depressing to see the kind of uncoordinated, ill-conceived and rather desperate attempt that the government are now doing to kind of through programs like the Community Renewal Fund to try to do some of the same things that Union Learning Fund was already delivering far more effectively. I'm going to share my screen now. He says, honestly, a man of a certain age struggling with technology is hopeless, isn't it? Hopefully you can all see that.
Yeah.
Great. So yeah, I'm going to talk to you about just a relatively small project that Ian Borkett and Jane Warwick put together whilst they were still with Unionlearn. And it's to do with the midlife skills review and the Value My Skills tool. So the kind of concept of a midlife skills review has been around for a few years now. Even before COVID, we had an aging population. The average life expectancy is now 81 years. Sometime in the 2030s, we can expect the average age will be over 50 years old for people actually in the country. Following COVID, we've now seen a major recruitment and retention crisis in the country. And there is a desperate need to try to make sure that people have the skills needed to work in the labour market. People are going to change jobs more than once. We all know about the way the labour market is aging. The COVID pandemic has made this considerably worse. We've seen many thousands of people almost disappear from the labour market typically older workers who perhaps don't feel safe or have found that the role they would be expected to be returning to isn't quite the one that they want. So that's really helped to create this really major problem that we have at the moment in terms of recruitment. So the concept of a midlife skills review is really quite straightforward. It is to work with a union learning rep or another mentor, perhaps from HR, to look at the skills you have, to look at the kind of roles that you might want to explore and you might want to hold, and for them to support you in that. You might remember the Value My Skills cards that were produced a little while ago. A lot of unions use those, especially retail union. And we were able, through a European program called Erasmus, to take those cards and that concept and to put it online as a lovely kind of tool that people could use. A very simple tool called Value My Skills. And you can find that on the Unionlearn website. And what I'm updating people on now is the work that's taking place subsequent to that. There is another follow-on project which is due to complete at the end of this year. And what we're doing through that is we're going to be building, these are just some images of the tool which are built by us by Saffron. So we've got this kind of gamified tool where you look at the particular skills and you talk to a colleague about how you would rate yourself on those. Over there, at the end, you generate a skills plan, an action plan, where you can look at the kind of skills that you have, and then you can compare that to what and think about the kind of roles that you might want to fulfill. So you get your personalized action plan. Feedback from users, following feedback from users, we've decided to tweak some of the elements and to build some new parts into it. So we're building some new resources to help mentors, to make sure that mentors really fully understand their role. They've got a really critical role in how you do this. It's it's not the easiest thing in the world to sit with someone and talk about skills. So making sure there are tips and guidance and things to help people through that. There's a new section on frequently asked questions for people using it, so they can be a little bit more supported in the work they do. We've added some new languages as well. And we are very much a multicultural, multilingual country these days. So you find some new languages on there, including Polish and Romanian. And one thing that we are doing, which is really very new, is we're going to map the results to kind of occupation groups. So at the moment, you'd get a personalized skills action plan. But we're hoping to be able to map it to something called ESCO, which is a kind of classification system for skills and competencies against occupations. So as you go through this process, by the end, you should be able to look at what kind of occupations are you currently able to look to work in, but also to explore if you had a particular desire to move into a different sector or to a different kind of job, what are the skills that you might need to pick up to help that. We'll also develop a few what we're calling quick win learning materials. A lot of unions are already very good at providing these kind of things. It's been a real bonus from the Union Learning Fund, but there'll just be ways of giving people really fast, positive results from relatively small and short engagements with learning materials to try to build their confidence and get them back into learning. As I say, it's something which a lot of unions have been very good at. And finally, we'll do some piloting of that updated tool to see how well it works and see if there's any more tweaks that need to be taken to help make it work better. So those are the developments. The people who are leading the work for TUC, and I'm really pleased to be working with, are Julia Jones and Carl Roper. My name's Andrew Dean. I'm at the University of Exeter, and I'm happy to answer any questions if people have them.
I don't think we have a facility for asking questions, but actually, yeah, your presentation is really clear, Andrew, and we've got, so if people do want to ask questions, we've got your email address there and Julia's email address. We've also got the link to the resources and the materials, which is absolutely fantastic. So thank you very much. It has been really interesting and you've not been overshadowed. It's really practical, interesting way to get workers talking about their skills and how, what they need to do in order to develop them and able to assess and evaluate where they are on that skills journey. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure.
That's great. And that's it, folks. We are amazingly finishing bang on time, for which I would like to thank everyone. I'd like to thank the speakers and the participants in this conference who've given us such an interesting and varied conference today. I think it's been marvellous, and it just shows that even though we would like to be together, when we can't be together, what we can do. So that's marvellous. I would like to thank the TUC staff, particularly Yusuf, but others who've been behind doing all the tech work and doing all the organisation. A conference like this doesn't just happen. It happens because people are invited to speak, they're given briefs, they discuss what they're going to say, how that fits in with the rest of the work. So I would like to very much thank the TUC staff who've been behind this, because it is hard work, and Kutsia and Carl, who actually gave such an interesting presentation about what more we need to do to represent our movement and to represent the diversity of our members and to build stronger branches and stronger workplaces to support our reps. I would like to thank all you ULRs and all of those who are carrying the learning torch through, all of you here today on links, on your Zoom, who've taken part in the chat and been interacting in the ways which we can to this conference. Your work is invaluable, and these have been hard times. It's been hard times because of the pandemic. It's been hard times because of a frankly incomprehensible decision by Gavin Williamson, but you've carried on because you know how important this work is, how essential it is, and how vital it is. So thank you for everything you've done during COVID to keep the Unionlearn torch burning. It is so important that as we hope for better times, we have something left. We have a strong Unionlearn project left when we can get better times and when the work can be properly recognised again. And I'll finally say this, union learning is here to stay. The government thought when they cut the funding that we would just collapse, but we haven't. We've got the support of more regional staff coming on board because of funding from the combined authorities. We will get stronger, and we will be in a good place when we have a government who can recognise, appreciate, value and support the work that unions do, the invaluable work that unions do in order to support and develop the least secure, the most vulnerable and the most needy in our workplace to develop their skills and to develop a joy and a love of learning, which is lifelong. So thank you for everything you do, and have a good afternoon.